Hello. Hello. It's lovely to be here again. Do pull up a chair, gather round, and do say that you're here, say where you're from. This is another session of Tea with a Druid, number 27. And I'd like to begin by talking about Celia, or Celia is here. That's wonderful. And Beth from Italy. That's great. So do keep introducing yourself. And I sometimes wonder whether we should start at 8:05. Tell me whether you think we should start at 8:05 so that you tell everybody 8 o'clock and then everybody comes in later. But no, here, look, people, everybody's turning up. Alan Hoskins from County Tipperary. Celia, who's Portuguese, living in Germany. Pat Booker, great. So let me tell you about what I wanted to talk about today. I was looking on the orders message board, and I noticed somebody's message where the guy who's writing it was saying, you know, I'm really want to follow the spiritual path, and I want to follow the course of the order, but I just don't have the time. I don't seem to have the time to meditate, the time to study the Guesi, the course material. And of course, people were piling in saying, me too, very common problem. Just not having enough hours in the day to do everything that one wants to do. And of course, it's not just in one's spiritual life that I think a lot of people don't have time. It's just generally time is in short supply. It's almost as if we're reaching peak time, and there just isn't enough time in the day. And just say to me whether that's your experience too, whether you generally feel that you don't have enough time. It would be interesting to see that. I see Elizabeth from Sweden, and all sorts of amazing names, and some of which I can't pronounce. I didn't know how to pronounce. Robert Herrick from Fort Collins. So just type in whether you feel you have enough time or not. Because, you know, I've struggled with this problem too, that I'm always so busy. There are always so many commitments that I have, and there just never seems to be enough time. And it just does that apply to you too? And so what I thought I'd do is offer you some thoughts that I've had about it, and do please add your thoughts too, either on the hoof as we go, or maybe it's easier to listen and then type them in afterwards. It's easier for me to read them afterwards, so please don't be offended if I don't comment immediately. But here we go. Here I'm just going to make a few suggestions, which is, first of all, one of the ways that I deal with this is I tell myself, like a mantra, that I have all the time in the world. You may remember a while back I talked about how Stephanie, my partner, told me that she'd done the shopping for 30 years and it was my turn, and I'd always said I'd hated shopping. And I found that just by telling myself that I loved shopping, bizarrely, I did. And so in the same way, I find that when I get stressed, I just say to myself, I have all the time in the world. And I believe that's metaphysically true. So I don't believe I'm fibbing to myself. I don't believe it's a lie. But it certainly helps me to calm down and makes me less stressed. And I think the tricky thing is, there's a doctor that I quote on my blog who talked about how the problem of being in a hurry is a sort of disease of our time, and the sense of being pressured for time creates stress, and we know that stress creates disease and illness, and affects our longevity too. So it's important to tackle this. I think however much you might say, well, this is a first world problem, I still think it's important to tackle this. And so that's one thing I do, is I just tell myself I have all the time in the world, and that calms me down. Another thing I do, again, perhaps it's obvious, but I find it's really helpful, is that when I become aware of all the things that I have to do, the piles of email, the piles of snail mail, the long to-do list, and so on, it's very easy for me to feel like a rabbit in the headlights. I become kind of paralyzed by it. It's just overwhelming and too much. And what I've learned to do is to get a sense of priorities. Just in the morning, just check what are the emails that need to be answered immediately, the letters that should be answered straight away, and so on. And to prioritize those, and then just simply do one thing at a time. So just put my head down, do one thing at a time. And by the end of the day, I've done a whole bunch of things, and the piles do eventually clear. And by having kind of tunnel vision or a narrow focus at that moment, really helps me to get through. So just one thing at a time. And then I become a talking bush. I'm sorry, I don't know why this happens. It's British Telecom. Let's blame them. I've paused my online backup. Nobody else in the house. There aren't any kids in the house now, so nobody else is using the internet. It's probably somebody up the street who's using it. So the third thing that I found really helpful is a while back I was watching a film called She's Having a Baby. And the punchline of the film, the very final scene in the film, when the main character is giving birth to the baby, there's the voiceover from another character in the film who said, what I realized was that what I was looking for was not to be found, but to be made. And I immediately related that to time. It's like, if I look for time, I won't find it. I have to actually make time. You know that sense you can have that time is always just around the corner and is eluding you, and you maybe say a typical thing would be you keep bumping into a friend, or every time you meet a friend you say, you must make time and have a drink or meet up for a meal, and you never do. Years go by maybe sometimes. And you know that if you just make time, if you just stop and say, hey, let's make a time. How about, next week or whenever, you make the time. And I've found that really helpful, not to look for time, not to find time, but to make time. It sort of shifts me from being in a sort of victim mode to a proactive, creative mode. So let's go a little deeper now and think about this from a spiritual perspective. In a way, we live with these two great constraints, or within these two dimensions of space and of time. And if you think about the dimension of space, if we're lucky, we will have made friends with space. We will have enough space in our lives. Stephanie and I struggled for many years to get enough physical space, living in small places and not having enough storage and so on. And now we're lucky, we have enough physical space. And of course, when we look around the world, we see how this is one of the great tragedies of the world today is the refugee crisis, the amount of people who are displaced and have no place. They have no space, they have no place at all. So that's something to look at, becoming friends with the spirit of place and finding one's space. But we don't have time for that now. We have to focus on this. So let's focus on the other great dimension that we live in, which is time, the other great constraint. I believe that we come out of a world beyond time and space, and we're incarnated down as souls into physical bodies in this world that is contained by time and space. So in the world of time, I think the answer is to become friends with time. And for a long time, time was my enemy. I battled with time. I fought to get enough time. And I hope over the years I've really tried to make friends with time. I'm not sure I've been fully successful. I don't think I have. I still need to make better friends with time. And what I'd like to suggest is if this applies to you as well, if you'd like to make friends with time or to get on better with time. Even though, studying Druidry or nature spirituality does help enormously because it helps us to get in the flow of time with the flow of the seasons. Still living in this kind of complex modern world that we find ourselves, it can still be extremely difficult, I think. And so my goal is to make friends with time. My goal is for time to become my ally. And if this appeals to you, and if you'd like to do this too, I'm going to suggest that we do a meditation now, where we proactively ask for time. Lee Samantha is saying, "What's up with the screen?" I think it's the broadband, Lee Samantha. It's just that when there isn't enough broadband, it compromises the vision, but hopefully it keeps the words. So, and also in the recording afterwards, you might find it looks different. Certainly the audio always seems to function on this Facebook Live feed. So this is my goal, to become friends with time and for time to be my ally. So if you'd like to join me, and as usual, you can just watch and listen and then decide to do it later, or actually join in the moment. There's something magical about feeling that we're all together in this, meditating at the same time. So in this meditation, we will ask for time, if time will be our friend and ally. So let's just take a few moments together, just to pause and just allow ourselves to become aware of being seated in a forest clearing. If the forest clearing works with you, that's great. Druids use this image a great deal. You might prefer another kind of natural image of sitting in a field or by the sea, whatever makes you feel peaceful and calm and evokes natural imagery. And we're going to use trees as well. So here we are, feeling close to the earth, sitting on the earth, just allowing our troubles and anxieties to drop away into the earth, and sensing the slow rhythm of the earth, just allowing ourselves to breathe in and out, tuning in to the natural rhythm of time, breathing in and breathing out. And we feel the grounding energy of the earth, the healing power of the earth. And we sense the trees around us, their roots deep in the soil, their trunks soaring upwards, the branches and leaves above us. And it's as if we can experience time as a tree might experience time, which feels much slower, much more in tune with the natural harmonies and rhythms of nature. And in this slow rhythm of the trees, we feel their protection and their power. And we sense the timeless sky above us, this blue sky. We sense the vitality in this sky. And as you breathe in the energy of the sky, so that the energy of the sky meets the energy of the earth within the center of your being. And now, if you will, you might like to imagine that you're just making a little journey from your grove, your clearing in the forest, towards a river that is nearby. And you just walk through the woodland a little bit, the soft undergrowth beneath you, until you find yourself coming to a river that's flowing softly and slowly. And you sit down beside this river, and you gaze at the water flowing gently by, aware of all the life. You might even catch a glimpse of a fish in the water, the birds singing in the trees. And you see the water moving slowly, and you announce to the world, to the spirits of nature, to yourself, and you announce to the spirit of time, dear spirit of time, may we become friends. May you be my ally. I would love you to be my ally. And I ask that I might receive a blessing from the spirit of time. And then you might want to imagine that you're stepping into the water, receiving the blessing of the river, or you might just sit quietly watching the river flow, just receiving the blessing of the spirit of time. And in receiving the blessing, you give thanks. You feel in tune with the river, with the land around it, with the trees and with the sky. And feeling at peace within, you imagine just walking back through the woods to the forest clearing, into the sacred grove. And you take your place in the sacred grove. And you feel yourself seated with the trees around you, the earth beneath you, and the sky above you. And you just move your awareness to your breathing, just sensing yourself breathing in and breathing out. Just tasting for a few moments a sense of timelessness, of peace and calm. And then you become aware of being in the grove again. Your companions from all over the world sitting around in this clearing too. You acknowledge them. You then allow this image to fade as you become aware of being seated in front of your computer or your phone or tablet, fully present in the here and now. And when you feel ready, you open your eyes. And so that meditation just took a few minutes, but hopefully you could sense a little bit of that sense of timelessness. I think that's one of the purposes of meditation, of the spiritual life and spiritual practice, is to allow us, or to create the means for us to dip into the timeless, also the spaceless, if you like, those two constraints that are holding us in this world. When we touch into that special place in meditation, we somehow transcend or go beyond the sense of time and space into a timeless moment, a spaceless space. you notice that it just took a few moments, and you know all these meditations that we do online just take a few moments. And I think what it helps me to, when I do short meditations for myself, it helps me to counter the voice inside me that says you don't have enough time to meditate, because actually it just takes a few minutes. And so I know that actually, even if I'm feeling stressed, I can just close my eyes, just imagine I'm in the sacred grove, just connect into that sense of timelessness, and then come out again. And that maybe, you know, can just take literally a few seconds. And then gradually, you know, the idea is that you spend a little bit more time. You know, to begin with, maybe your life is really pressured and you can only drop into those moments for a few moments. But gradually, maybe you can start to make time rather than trying to find time. You can make a little more time, make 5 minutes, 10 minutes or so on, and benefit thereby. So thank you for being here. It's been lovely to be with you. You know, I see all your names and the comments, and I'm going to so enjoy going back through the list, seeing who's here, making comments or not, and just generally feeling that sense of connection with you. So lots of love, and bless you, and see you next week at the same time. Okay, bye. Okay, boop, and then